the sunshine brings the light. Fill me out with a flame. I will let you in this game. Take me out when I'm down. 'Cause with you I'm safe and sound. 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 So just find me, just find me. Sparks will fly if we scream no. This is not how we're gonna go. We are the ones who will never let go. Just watch us roll to where no one knows. We'll never grow. Don't look back, we're here to stay. A life we knew would come one day. And this is it, the borderline to where the future leaves us behind. The fire will burn and never die, looking through the eyes of a brand new life. And so just find me, just find me. Sparks will fly if we scream no. This is not how we're gonna go. We are the ones who will never let go. Just watch us roll to where no one knows. We'll never grow. Get you one more time. I really wanna cross the line. I do it all before I die. I wanna get it on tonight. I wanna get you one more time. I really wanna cross the line. I wanna get you one more time, one more time, one more time, one more time. I want it one more time. I really need to make it right. Energy I overdose, 'cause I'm ready to reload. I need it one more time, but baby then again twice. But I don't know if I'm ready to let go. I'm gonna have you one more time. I'm gonna hit it one more night with you, with you. I am committed 'cause I know it's you I want. Hope I never see you go home. Oh, come along. I'm gonna have you one more time. I'm gonna have you one more night. I wanna get you one more time. I really wanna cross the line. I do it all before I die. I wanna get it on tonight. I wanna get you one more time. I really wanna cross the line. I wanna get you one more time, one more time, one more time, one more time. Ooh, this time I wanna take it slow. I don't need my phone. I know how to picture in my mind the nights with you. get you one more time. I really wanna cross the line. I do it all before I die. I wanna get it on tonight. I wanna get you one more time. I really wanna cross the line. I wanna get you one more time, one more time, one more time, one more time. And every way you get me, started a fire now, baby, deep in, I'll be right back, can't see you just one more time.
Hello, hello. It's Friday. I'm gonna hit that, get that animation to start. So we got a nice little animation while we do the introductions here. Hello, everybody. It's Friday. I'm gonna close this because there's a glare on my face. It is Friday. I'm gonna put my water bottle here so I remember to drink water, and that way people are aware that I am being true to the hydrate challenge. Anyway, welcome to Science Friday. I'm Shark Party. I'm a fourth-year graduate student in a program called Social Neuroscience. It's kind of merging social psychology and neuroscience together. We're tackling questions found in social psychology or psychology in general, and we also use methodologies from psychology. But we also use methodologies from neuroscience, such as EEG, EKG, MRI, fMRI, those types of things. So kind of incorporating physiological and biological measures into our research. And so I'm in my fourth year of graduate school, which means I'm in my dissertation phase. So you'll see that plastered on my About page, and just on random days I might tweet out that there's no Taco Tuesday or Science Friday because I have to do something for my dissertation. With that being said, without further ado, today's topic was inspired by today's talk. So if you're absolutely new to Science Friday, well, first of all, welcome. And second of all, Science Friday is inspired by NPR National Public Radio Science Friday, where they just kind of talk to scientists and get their science out there to the public. And I feel like I want to be me as a graduate student who gets to hear a lot of research firsthand, because the researchers literally come to our campus and present, and we all are in this room, and they give a talk in a low stress environment. They're just giving a talk oh, this is what I'm researching, this is what I'm doing. Sometimes it's a job talk, so it's a little bit more stressful, but nonetheless, we listen to a lot of research on a weekly basis. And so this just allows for scientists to exchange ideas and stuff. But the thing that I wanted to do with one of my goals of this channel is to share that science with the public and get it to the public a lot sooner. I just feel like a lot of the science we discuss during our talks every Friday. So as a graduate student, I have to attend a talk every Friday, and this is where I get to listen to science and current science and stuff like that. That stuff probably won't hit the public for 5 to 10 more years, because they are probably still working on these data or on their findings, the results. They're probably still working on that stuff. And then they have to write it up, publish it. They have to get it into the right journals, and the journals have it behind a paywall, right? So the public doesn't really have access to it. And, well, I kind of want to give the public access to it. So now with just one caveat or one little note or asterisk, whatever you want to call it, is I'm not going to report exactly what I heard because I don't want to play a game of telephone. In that, like, I'm sitting there listening to this research for the first time in my life as well. And so I can't sit there and try to report everything a couple of hours later because I barely listened to the talk today. So instead, what Science Friday does, or what I do during Science Fridays, is I take the talk as a kind of like inspiration point or talking point or jumping off point. And so today's talk was a researcher came in, and it was via Zoom, so I guess it didn't come like went online, I guess, and talked to us a little about diversity, how people perceive diversity, like how do people actually perceive or conceptualize diversity in their community, and also feelings of inclusion. How do you feel like you belong? Like, what are the necessary components, both societal and personal? So like you can think about two different levels. Actually, there's three different levels that she presented. I'm happy to go into really nitty-gritty details if people are really interested. I did take some snapshots of some graphs. I'm not going to post them or share them here because I would need to get permission from that scientist first to share all of the materials and stuff. So I'm not able to just share it willy-nilly. But I can't speak of the research because this is like the point, is to spread the research. I just can't spread the figures and like her slides and stuff because that's her property. So it's just this notion of belongingness. So that's what inspired today's Science Friday. So to begin to even talk about or tackle the question, what makes you feel like you belong, or do you belong to a group, or does another person belong? To begin to tackle that question, I'm going to change this song really quick. This is like really fast-paced. Another fast-paced song for like a really calm chat. Let's try one more. Okay. Kinda? Okay. Anyway, so to begin to talk about something as complicated as group behaviors and feeling like you belong, because that involves, like I was saying, that involves multiple layers. One layer is the society you live in, so the structures, so your groups, your social groups, hierarchies, X, Y, and Z of what a society can present. But there's also the level of who you are, how receptive you are to other people, how like agreeable you are, so to speak, how open you are to new experiences, things like this, that people can vary on. So there's multiple levels to consider, and so to begin to consider that, and the reason why, where it says over here on my, what is this? I don't even know. My camera's like flipped. As you can see, it's flipped. The name right here is wrong. As you can see, it's called Let's Talk About Social Identity. So that's where we're going to begin. We're going to talk about social identity theory. So before I begin talking about social identity theory, I'm going to first of all put that social identity theory into the chat in case anyone wants to just copy paste it and Google it, follow along. I'm going to put it right there because what I'm going to turn our attention to is a Wikipedia page. Yes, I'm a grad student and sometimes I do use Wikipedia. It's not the worst. It's not the best, of course. I don't cite it. I never cite Wikipedia. But what Wikipedia can do for us, that's very efficient. The thing that I really appreciate about Wikipedia is that it's a really quick way of getting a lot of citations that are important to whatever you're researching. So what we can call like seminal works, kind of like central pieces. So social identity theory, the seminal work there would be by a group of, or a team of researchers named Tajfel and Turner. Wow, Henri Tajfel. I thought Henri was the last name for a second. Henri Tajfel. So Tajfel and Turner. So basically, if you just Google social identity theory and you go to Wikipedia, you'll start finding out about these researchers, and it's not wrong. So sometimes it can be wrong. That's why we do take things on Wikipedia with a grain of salt. But nonetheless, it gives a citation. So if you scroll down, and I'll show everyone. The reason I'm not switching yet is I want to give a quick pause. But anyways, when you scroll down a Wikipedia page, you do see a lot of citations, and that's where it matters. You can verify your sources. Okay, so before we dive into social identity theory, I'm going to give it about 30 seconds to minute max, so I can also drink some water, for people to continue to fill in, and maybe if they want to chat or have any questions before we start diving into theory, I'm happy to start talking. And as always, during any Science Friday or any Taco Tuesday or any gaming session or anything that I'm streaming, any questions welcome. Doesn't have to be on the topic. Anything's welcome. We can talk about literally anything you want. That's what the space is for. Ooh, Friday. Let's give it 20 more seconds. For people listening to this on YouTube, you guys are champions. I mean, so are the people listening to this live. All of you are champions. But it just also it sustains motivation to see views actually go up on the YouTube videos because, importantly, actually, I'm glad I mentioned that. Importantly, I do want to mention that during Science Fridays and Taco Tuesdays, these are all recorded and they're uploaded to YouTube. Gaming streams are not uploaded to YouTube. Those are like office hours. That's the way I kind of see it. I kind of see Taco Tuesday and Science Friday as like my lectures, if you will. If I were a professor, if you're used to the college life, you might be familiar with the whole college or professor structure where you have lectures, but they also hold like office hours where you can go in and ask questions whenever or talk to them about anything. It doesn't have to be about the class. Sometimes I recommend that to college students, if you're really liking a class and you want to get involved in research, you can go talk to the professor. A lot of them are very friendly people. Some of them might not be as receptive, but that's just general truth of, you know, any group of humans. You're going to have your nicer people and you're going to have your meaner people, but a lot of the professors are quite nice, and so they're happy to talk about the research, so you don't have to only talk about the class. But anyway, the way I see my gaming streams is kind of like my office hours. I kind of hang out, game, chill, set like a tone where we can just kind of have fun. But if you want to talk about anything that we talk about during Taco Tuesdays or Science Fridays or in general, that's what I'm there for. So on Science Fridays and Taco Tuesdays, though, those are recorded and they are uploaded to YouTube. That way we have an archive of every single kind of stream, if you will. Kind of treat it as a podcast as well that way. So those are all recorded. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the YouTube people that also give these a listen or a view. So thank you so much. All right, let's begin to transition to social identity theory. Yikes. If I could actually get that to work, that would be cool. There we go. So I got this nice Wikipedia page up. As I said, I don't know how visible this is. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. Okay. This is going to be a weird song to try to read to, so let's hold up with that song. Let's switch over to a more calm song there. Okay, so social identity theory. So I was already mentioning a little bit about the complexity of belongingness and feeling like you belong, and that type of behavior and emotion is very complex. So I began by saying, let's talk a little bit about social identity theory, and I like to approach it this way. And there's many ways of approaching a complex behavior like belongingness. This isn't like, I'm not saying this is the right way. I'm still, you know, I just want to mention I'm still a graduate student. I'm still in training to be a PhD person. But this is just one approach that we can take to understanding belongingness, or that idea of like, what's a group? What constitutes a group? When do I feel like I belong versus not? When do I feel rejected? When do others feel rejected, etc., etc.? This is one approach we can take, is taking a social psychological approach, and more specifically a social identity theory approach. And so this theory is kind of like a very broad and foundational theory for a lot of current extant, like currently living social psychological models, theories, research, so on and so forth. So, sorry for that long spiel there, but it's just this theory is really big in my lab, so it's kind of hard to introduce such a impactful research, try to summarize it in like 20 seconds. So sorry about that. So let's begin. So social identity is the portion of an individual self-concept. Okay, so your by the way, if you're unfamiliar with Science Fridays, I like to sometimes, when it comes to like a theory that is very defined, very well researched, I actually like to just address Google or Wikipedia. We read it together, or I read it to the stream, and then I unpack the sentence in more layman's terms, because I am used to these terms. I'm not trying to sit here as a superior being. I'm here to just share what I love and what I love. I'm here to share what I love doing, which is science, and I just really believe in science and education. So I'm here to share all of that. So I'm not here to sit on my high horse and try to pretend like I know more than all of you. I'm sure all of you know a lot of stuff that I don't. This is just something that I devote a lot of my time to, versus you might devote a lot of your time to something completely different. So you might know a lot about that. So I just unpack it and put it into terms we can all hopefully we can all get it into equal grounds for everyone. So people who aren't classically, like if you're not educated in psychological sense, we can make it, hopefully I can put into terms that kind of unpacks it from that term. And if this already makes straightforward sense, awesome. So that's how this kind of works. So social identity is the portion of an individual self-concept derived from perceived membership in a relevant social group. So social identity, that's what we're talking about. So social, again, the interaction between humans, your identity, who you are, is the portion of an individual self-concept. So you as a person, you are a human person who has an identity, and here's where it starts to get a little muddy, I guess, especially if you're really new to psychology. And you as a person who can think about yourself. And so you yourself have an image of yourself. And so this is called your self-concept, right? So you have a social identity, this because you're going to socialize, you're going to interact with other humans, and a part of, and that social identity is a part of who you are as a person, because you also have parts of you who doesn't interact, it's not concerned over social interactions. Now, there is a lot of thought there's a lot of, there's like this notion that social identity is composed of most of who you are, because we are social beings by nature. So it's social identity is the portion of an individual self-concept derived from perceived membership in a relevant social group. So that latter portion is that sense of belongingness I was talking about at the beginning of this stream. What constitutes a group, and at what point do you feel like you belong, or what point do you feel like you don't belong to a group? So there's two little important nuggets there that I want to unpack in that sentence, where it goes derived from perceived membership. So it doesn't even matter that you actually have membership. Sorry, that was getting a little jarring. I had to change that song. So sorry. So it doesn't matter whether you actually have membership or not, whether a group actually exists and there's actually a physical membership, or whether that membership is where you were born, right? And let's just take one step back. I'm going to take a quick pause before we continue with this social identity theory. Let's just take a quick step back and let's just quickly define group. Okay? So a group can be anything. You can make it up, and if people begin to identify with that and kind of form a blob, there are definite. This is going to sound very redundant, but there are definite definitions, more precise. That's a better way. There are way more precise definitions than what I'm about to say. But just to give you the general gist, is you can make up anything. For example, gaming. If you're a gamer, people who play that game start to identify as people of that game, right? Rocket Leaguers, Fortniters, people like that, people who generally play that game, people start to identify with each other when you put them in the right context. Within the game, you might not feel like as a group, but then put everyone that plays a certain game in a convention where there's all these other games, and then all of a sudden you start to see people kind of form because they have things to talk about, things in common, things that kind of constitute a group. So anything can be a group. It doesn't have to be a membership, so to speak, but it can be, right? Being part of a soccer team, making it to varsity. A varsity is a subgroup of a general group of being an athlete, right? So you have like subordinate groups, such as being a citizen of a nation, right? Within a nation, you can have multiple sub-identities. So this is where we're coming from. Hey, how's it going? Welcome, Lynn. I don't know how to pronounce this. Communities can be groups as well. If you give it a label, that can constitute a group. Because what I'm getting at here with the social identity is you have a perceived membership. So again, whether or not you actually have the membership, whether the people from that group identify you as a member that will matter to a certain extent, and we can talk about what it feels like, what happens to the brain, what happens to the identity when it gets rejected. There's actually a lot of research happening in some of the labs around me that are looking into the rejection of an identity. It's looking into like biracial identities, multiracial identities, intersectional identities. Intersectional is kind of like saying I identify, like you have your, for example, one of the groups is males. You can belong to the group of male, you can belong to the group of female, you can belong to the group of X, Y, and Z. Doesn't matter. Like if it has a label and people all kind of can have similar traits in common and things to talk about, you can kind of call it a group. So intersectionality would be, oh, I'm also Hispanic, so I could be, my intersectionality would be I'm a Hispanic male, I'm also a grad student. That's another social identity of mine. So there's a lot of identities within me as one solid person, me as the person that sits before you, named Shark Party. There's a lot of sub-identities, if you will. So the perceived membership, that's step one, and step two is of a relevant social group. So relevant, even in Wikipedia, is highlighted, right? I don't know if it's highlighted, in relation to this definition here, but it is important that we highlight that word relevant to the social group. Why? Because I can identify with Blarg or Magarbin, but does it actually impact me as a person? Does it actually impact my emotions? Does it have any influence on my emotions? As, say, getting accepted into grad school. Right? Getting accepted to grad school immediately puts me into a group that I didn't belong into previously. Getting accepted brought me a lot of joy. It brought me a lot of happiness. Of course, a lot of it was self-derived. It was a lot of work I put into getting it, like my work into applying into grad school and getting accepted. But nonetheless, I was still accepted into a group. And that's a relevant group, something that I deem my emotions can be swayed by this group. I deem them like, wow, I got accepted into this school and I'm happy because it means something to me. Versus if someone comes up to me and I'm on the street, someone randomly comes up to me and says, hey, you've been accepted into Marbin, and they give me a badge, I could still go on about my day and not really care so much. So that's why relevant is important. It needs to matter in that sense. In fact, I think it might be stepping ahead, or going a little bit ahead here, but a lot. To summarize, if we needed to summarize social identity theory really fast, one way of quickly summarizing it would be a lot of our self-esteem and pride is derived from the social groups we belong to. And in fact, I think it's believed that like at least 60% or the majority of your self-esteem is actually derived from the social groups you belong to. This is why rejection can hurt so much. And rejection hurts both on a biological level, especially if you want to take an evolutionary psychological approach of being rejected from a group could mean, you're now out in the jungles by yourself, and so your probability of dying is now increased by a lot. So you have a biological response to fear being rejected, but you also have a psychological and cognitive response of being rejected, in that a lot of your self-esteem can be derived and your pride can be derived from the groups you belong to. This is why you might hear your friends pride themselves, I belong to this, or I bought that. Some people pride themselves of buying a certain brand. Why do you think certain brands try to create brand loyalty? They try to play with social identity, try to make an identity behind it, that owning that brand puts you in some category that not everyone belongs to. Because that's the other thing that can function with social identities, is the lines that we're drawing with our social identities. It can sometimes cause friction to draw lines between groups, right? And to keep them distinct. Because if groups aren't distinct, then they aren't groups by definition. By definition, there's a line to a group. It's a circle, and there's a line that distinguishes the group from something else. Otherwise, it's not a group. You're just a random assortment of individuals. So I've gone over a lot really fast, so I'm going to give it like 30 seconds to let that sink in, and in those 30 seconds, I'm going to go turn on the lights in my apartment because it's getting dark. I will be right back. All right, I'm back. And I do want to just make sure that, that your comment was right, Lynn. I'm going to call you Lynn. I hope that's okay. I don't know if you want to be called something else like Lynn Fositov. I don't know. But yes, communities are definitely constitute a group. I think I did mention it, but just to make sure that that I'm involving your comments. And that's kind of what we're here for. I want to start a conversation with people. However, this is a new channel, so a lot of the time I do have to speak to the void, which I'm super happy doing. Okay, let's continue to unpack social identity theory. So far we've discussed a little bit about groups, what they are, the fact that you have to have a line. Sometimes those lines can cause friction between groups, right? You can probably think of situations. We don't need to really go into super details. Right now, I do want to mention, I'm going to put a quick pause on Science Friday and social identity theory. Some of these theories and some of the things I work with can be of a sensitive nature. But I'm talking to the stream and to all of you as a scientist, not as someone that's trying to have a biased agenda and trying to persuade the community to do something. I'm just trying to report the science and trying to just communicate what we're currently finding or what the science has found or what we currently know. A lot of people are actually shocked how much social psychology knows about current psychological dilemmas like social media and stuff like that. We actually know a lot of it. People are shocked from Netflix documentaries, especially if you saw The Social Dilemma, things like that. This is studied. This is known, a lot of it. And this is the reason why things can, sometimes social media functions so well. It's because there is a science to it. There's a science to the madness, if you will. So I'm just here to deliver that. So when we do, if we inevitably do sometimes get into touchy topics, and that's fine, but I just want to make sure that we're approaching this from a mature side, that we're scientists about this. We're leaving, you don't have to, you the viewer. If something's upsetting, you can communicate that with me, of course. But I, as a scientist, my job is to leave my emotions at the door. So I just try to talk about data and kind of the science of things, which attempts to leave emotions at the door. Okay, with that being said, I mentioned that because when it comes to groups, you can think about groups that in history or now that are, not doing so well with each other. They kind of have friction with each other. You can think, and it doesn't always have to be, our minds sometimes may gravitate to race because race has a lot to do with who we are if you think of it from a biological sense. But just across a lot of categories of social identities, you can think of situations where identities are clashing. It could be a hierarchical clashing, such as the income, socioeconomic status. Those are groups too, right? Maybe you've taken history classes and heard of clashes between kings and the peasants, and uprisings and revolutions and stuff like that. Those are social identity boundaries that are they're at war with each other. There's frictions there. Now, not all social identities have to have friction either. So we talked a little bit about that. So let's press a little bit forward. As originally formulated by social psychologists Henri Tajfel and John Turner in the 1970s, I think they're British, or they were British, in the 1970s and the 1980s. This is a little bit old, but relative. This is one thing I do want to point out really quick. Compared to other sciences where those formulas and theories and models are still relevant to today, for example, Newton's law, like F equals ma, we're still using it to this day, to my knowledge. It's still an accurate formula. That's from hundreds of years ago. So this isn't even 100 years old. So this is a very young science. This is why our science is a tough one. It's very new. It doesn't have hundreds of years of experience to build on. It's still learning about itself too. Science is an ever-learning process. Anyways, so in the 1970s and 1980s, social identity theory introduced the concept of a social identity as a way in which to explain intergroup behavior, another highlighted word. All right, let's unpack that sentence a little bit. So social identity theory, that's the theory we're currently talking about, introduced the concept of social identity. We've already talked about what a social identity can be, as a way to explain intergroup behavior. Guess what I've already been doing with all of you in the chat here in the stream. I've been talking about groups and causing friction. That's called an intergroup behavior or an intergroup process. So racism is such an example of friction. An outcome of friction between communities or groups could be racism. That's how it manifests itself. Charity is another way of manifesting, non-friction, just more what would you call it? I don't want to call it co-working, co-living, cohabitating, coexisting. I don't know what you want to call it, but help each other out type mentality. So the opposite of being racism and keep them out. That's the opposite. Let's help each other out. Let's lend a hand. That's an intergroup behavior, right? And that's also studied in social psychology. So some social psychologists study intergroup conflict. Other ones study intergroup behavior that is positive, like altruism, charity, donation, love, romance, things that involve positive stuff. So we have social psychologists on a lot of different topics. So this is intergroup behavior can incorporate so much of human behavior when it comes, it literally incorporates group behavior. Okay. Social identity theory is described as a theory that predicts certain intergroup behaviors on the basis of perceived group status differences. So I've already been talking about that. The perceived legitimacy, again, that I mentioned that kind of towards the beginning of the stream about how legitimate the group is actually perceived to be. If someone came up to me and invited me to the McGarbin-Larbin group, it wouldn't really affect me that much. But me getting accepted grad school made me really happy because I perceived it to be like a legitimate institution, a legitimate group of people who take their job serious and, you know, are producing science. So that's where the legitimacy is coming from here. So that let's restart the sentence because now I kind of went on a tangent there a little bit. So social identity theory is described as a theory that predicts certain intergroup behaviors on the basis of perceived group status differences, the perceived legitimacy and stability of those status differences, and the perceived ability to move from one group to another. That's called permeability. So sometimes you might not get friction if there's perceived, if there's a lot of perceived permeability, because if people think, like let's just take socioeconomic status permeability. If you perceive that you can go among the ranks quite easily, why would you cause a ruckus? If you perceive that it's impossible, then you might not cause a ruckus either. You might just accept it, and this can fall under something called like the just world hypothesis, or to what degree you believe, you know, this is the way things work, and that's that, and you just have to accept it and cope. So basically here, what we're saying is so you could also adopt a similar approach saying I'm not going to cause a ruckus for very different reasons. This is why psychology is kind of important. We can get a very similar behavior on the surface, someone not causing a ruckus in society, but you can have two different reasons. One, they perceive a lot of mobility, so they say, why cause ruckus? I can be the rich one on the top, so why would I want to ruin that? Or you can have a person in the same society perceiving there's absolutely no mobility, but that's just the way the world is. That was the cards I was given for life, and I was born this way, and that's the way it goes, and I'm just going to try to make the best of this. So in both situations, you might have a person on the outside who might not cause a ruckus or cause any disorder in your society or like any uproars or anything, but two complete different reasons. So perception matters a lot too. This is why, again, social psychology and psychology in general can be quite complicated and tough to do scientifically, but we do our best to apply as much science as we can. Okay, this contrasts with occasions where the term social identity theory is used to refer to general theorizing about, okay, yeah, we don't have to go over that. So let's pause it there with Wikipedia. Let's start to move the conversation a little bit. Let's see is there something we can leave this on? Do they have the minimal group paradigm? I want to find the minimal group paradigm. Just so we can show. So I want to move on to minimal group paradigm, and the reason why I want to move on to that one, they don't have it? Minimal group studies, bada bing, bada boom. Minimal group paradigm. Got it. All right. The reason I want to bring this up is, so we're not taking, this isn't a lecture. Wow. I cut myself like 3 times. Cut myself off like 3 times there. This isn't a lecture again. This is intended to be a chat, a conversation. But again, this is a growing channel, so it's kind of lecture-y. So I'm not going to take a deep dive into anything unless we really want to. If someone in the chat wants me to continue going on a certain topic, I am so happy to expand on anything. So social identity theory is kind of that science behind, all right, our groups, you know, our perceived legitimacy of those groups, perceived mobility of those groups, and that kind of ties into who we are, our self-esteem, our pride. So moving on to start to tackle this idea of, do I belong? What makes me feel like I belong? And I bring that notion up because I think it's really relevant today. We see a lot of issues in social media, I just see a lot of controversies regarding social identities on there. So it's just kind of, I think it's important to explore the science of our social identities and try to understand a little bit of the science, so that way we can better understand these situations happening around us and unfolding before us. So, hey Vanessa, welcome. Welcome to Science Friday. We're talking about groups and social identities and what causes us to feel like we belong to groups. What are the actual factors in our environments and within ourselves? I've already discussed a little bit about social identity theory, defined it. We went over this Wikipedia of it, so if you want to recap, let me know. I'm happy to start at any point. So right now I'm going to talk about minimal group paradigm. I'm doing well. How about you? I'm also happy to pause the lectures at any point. I'm here to chat with people. I'm doing well. How are you? How's your Friday? Let's take a water break. Since we're going to take a little break to interact, I'm going to go back to social identity theory. So we have the definition still up on the screen here, but we don't have to talk about this. You're okay. Just okay. You don't have to answer that if you don't want to either. I gotta keep my water bottle visible on the camera here so I can keep remembering to drink water. Even though I'm not really having issues remembering to drink water, to be honest, so I don't know how necessary this step is. Okay, well, yeah, okay, I figured. I thought that's where my mind went to. I thought that's that you were maybe feeling tired. I've been there, you know, had horrible nights of sleep. Not saying that I know what you're going through, but I don't know. I thought you might still be struggling with that. Yeah, I'm happy to chat about that if you want to unload here. I just again want to remind you that this is live and it's usually goes on YouTube, and so it's recorded. But if you want to vent, we can put a pause on social identity. If you're interested in hearing about social identity, get your mind off things, I can continue. And I was about to get into minimal group paradigm, which is a really cool laboratory, I don't know how you want to pronounce it. It's a really cool scientific experimental way of making people feel like they're part of a group and making them function in a way in favor of that group, even though you as a scientist just made up that group like 10 minutes before the participants got to the lab. That's called minimal group paradigm, and that's where we get a lot of evidence for group behavior and how we can play with group behavior and how we can kind of dissect social identities before your very eyes using minimal group paradigm. So this allows us as social psychologist scientists, so we don't even have to open up your brain. We can start to kind of see your psyche, if you will, using minimal group paradigm, using paradigms that get you to behave in very predictable ways in accordance to social identity theory. So social identity theory predicts this, actually. Actually, let's talk really fast before I talk about minimal group paradigm. So yeah, I'm going to leave it up to you, Vanessa. If you want to vent, unload, go for it. But if this sounds interesting to you, and maybe it helps you get mind off things and maybe relax your mind, then I'm super happy to press forward. Here's what I was about to get into. In-group favoritism. There's also pro-social behaviors as predicted. So this is what I was mentioning about how different being in different groups or having different group interactions or group processes can lead to negative things like racism, like friction between groups. You know, it can lead to those things, or positive things like charity. But in-group favoritism is this notion also known as in-group bias. I have had Science Fridays on bias and implicit bias, and so your social identity actually plays a role, or vice versa. Bias can actually play a role with your social identity and vice versa. That's a long conversation there. But yeah, it's basically this notion of you give preferential treatment to others when they're perceived to be in the same in-group as you. And so minimal group paradigm can get people to exhibit this notion of in-group favoritism. So it's a very cool study. Where was that minimal group paradigm? Okay, so there's that. So I'll leave it up to you. I also don't want to put you on the spot if you're not feeling it. We can talk about minimal group paradigm. We can move on. Take a swig of water. Alright, well. Okay, totally fine. Then let's press forward. Hopefully this gets your mind off things. I'm going to press forward with minimal group paradigm then. So again, if you're just joining us now, talking about social identity theory, talking about groups, what causes us to feel like we belong? What about others? What causes them to feel like they belong or not belong? What is a group? How do you perceive a group? So we've already kind of defined those. Yeah, go for it. I'll just press forward here, but take your time. Anyways, so what defines a group? What constitutes a group? What constitutes your membership in the group? Your perception of the membership in the group? Things like that. So I've already talked about those things. I'm happy to readdress anything. But now we're moving on to minimal group paradigm. And minimal group paradigm is a laboratory way or an experimental way to manipulate group membership. You, as the scientist, can sit there and make up whatever group you want. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it Bluggenblaggen and call a different group Schugen-Nagen, whatever you want. You can call it whatever you want. And you can get people to start identifying with those labels and start behaving in a predictable manner, such as in-group favoritism. So the in-group favoritism is, again, right here, what I was mentioning. This in-group favoritism is this effect where people give preferential treatment to others when they are perceived to be in the same in-group. That's called in-group favoritism. So you can get people to start exhibiting that. So you can get a bunch of random people off the street, put them in, just grab them all, and they will all be random with each other, right? They're not gonna, why would they, like, assuming a perfect world, they all are random. Why would they start giving each other money or treating each other with any preferential treatment? Especially if you put them to do games and stuff, they might not exhibit any preferential treatment. However, the moment you start to group them up and start to give them a social identity with which to identify and a group label, then they start to exhibit in-group favoritism. And this is where I'm saying you can even make up those groups and they'll still exhibit this. Hair tie stuck? No, I'm sorry. Sorry to hear your hair tie is stuck. I have no idea what... I mean, in high school I did have long hair. But I don't remember what that's like. Not gonna lie. I had very long hair in high school. It was like down to here. And I had my electric guitars. I thought I was like the cool kid. A lot of people say I was the cool kid. But that was my mom. So when I say a lot of people, it was my mom and my dad said I was the cool kid. So anyway, minimal group paradigm. So minimal group paradigm is a methodology employed in social psychology, so I've already been talking about that. Although it may be used for a variety of purposes, it is best known as a method for investigating the minimal conditions. So this is where it gets its name, minimal group paradigm. The minimal conditions required for discrimination. Here it's not meant in a racist sort of way, but an ability to discern or to be able to tell the difference between two things to occur between groups. Oh, I see. Yeah, I had long hair all the way around. I had like long hair in the front, long hair down in the shoulders. Played the electric guitar. I wanted to play the drums, but my dad made me a deal, or I made a deal with my dad, or I guess he made a deal with me, that he would buy me my first guitar if I changed my mind on drums, because he was gonna let me play the drums if I bought them myself. He's like, if you buy them, like I have no power over like blocking you, but if you play the guitar, I'll pay for your guitar. And so that was the deal. So I was like, and I was in high school. I was like a freshman or a sophomore. So I was like, no money, I'm broke. Like, that's like a lot of Saturdays working and I don't know. So I just took the guitar. So I had long hair. Anyway, so minimal group paradigm. Where is it? So it's for investigating what are the minimal conditions to be able to discern or discriminate between two groups or to like establish groups. So can I use Bluggenblaggen or not? Would that work? That could be a question if you wanted to answer with minimal group paradigm. You could answer that question. But then there's a lot of contingent factors or a lot of things that would impact results, I guess. I don't want to lose you with the nitty gritty there. So, Experiments using this approach have revealed that even arbitrary distinctions between groups, such as preferences for certain paintings, I'll explain that in a second. That one's funny. That has a personal story with my own lab, actually, semi-personal, or the color of their shirts can trigger a tendency to favor one's own group at the expense of others, even when it means sacrificing in-group gain. So let's unpack that, and we don't have to get into methodology, we don't have to get into the super nitty-gritty of this. If you're really interested in what I'm talking about and want to follow along, I'll post the links in the chat right now if you just want them. Here's the one for social identity, and here is the one for minimal groups, for minimal group paradigm. So again, I am a graduate student. I never cite Wikipedia. If you are a student, high school, middle school, college, grad school, postdoc, hopefully you already know us by postdoc, we don't cite Wikipedia, but Wikipedia is not a bad place to start when you're going to start like wanting to learn about something. Because the cool thing is, as I've studied social psychology quite often, so they didn't get this wrong. This isn't a lie that Tajfel and Turner were researchers in this era. So yes, you do take things on Wikipedia with a grain of salt. You don't take it as instant truth, but you do get a general sense of things, and then you can use further Googles to like corroborate or to verify or confirm that this is also right. But the cool thing about Wikipedia is this bottom part. I mentioned this at the very beginning of the stream. This part. So if you're writing papers and you need a site, or you just want to go read the actual science, these are the papers in Wikipedia. When you see these ones for scientific things and you see like these little numbers, these are citations. When you see that citation, that's the actual scientific article. And if you want to read one and you're having issues trying to get it, let me know, and I'll try to figure something out. So, back to this. So experiments using this approach, minimal group paradigm, have revealed that even arbitrary distinctions, so arbitrary, if you're unfamiliar with that term, means like vague, random, like there's no meaning to it, it's just, meaningless, like arbitrary. Like if I'm going to make names for groups, non-arbitrary names would be like soccer team names. Like people can identify with Barcelona, FC Barcelona, or Juventus. Or football, if you want to take that. You can identify with what's called the Patriots, be a Patriots supporter. Or you could be I don't know American football very well, I'm so sorry. You could be a Dolphins supporter. Me when someone says I'm in charge. Wait, what? Who held the gun to your head? Yeah, I always like to put even when I teach, because I do have to teach from time to time. This quarter, I lead a section or a lab, if you will. So I have to teach, like I'm lecturing students. I like to tell my students they're in charge. Like they can stop me at any point, ask questions if they want me to go back, if they want to talk about something. Obviously in class I do say like I don't have the same kind of rules as I do on the stream, where on the stream we can talk about anything. In class, obviously, I stay on topic and get through all my slides, but what I'm saying is like if people if they don't know a certain topic, I'm happy to like hash it out for them and stuff like that. So yeah, I like to put the people in charge. And I just kind of want to be a part of that group, talking about group identities. I just want to be a fellow person in that group, and we all just have a conversation and chat about things. And I just share what I do. So that's why I'm also happy to hear from viewers, because I don't know what you do, and so it's cool to hear what other people are doing and and your all perspective on the things I'm talking about here. So, yeah. You hate being in charge? Then I'll continue to be in charge, if you will. There's no real charge here. And when I say you can take charge, it's you can say, yeah, I just continue with your shark, continue with your talking, and that's the direction. That's being in charge right there. So yeah. Anyway, I'm just gonna wrap up on like a black sheep by the wolves. But there are no wolves. We're all just a bunch of humans trying to make sense of things, floating on a rock in space. The wolves is a perception, as are the sheep. Those are group labels. See social identity right there. That could be a perception. Those wolves could just be other sheep. I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, so arbitrary distinctions. So the minimal group paradigm, what that revealed was that even arbitrary distinctions, arbitrary again, I was getting at what it meant. So non-arbitrary labels for groups can be belonging to a certain racial category, gender, belonging to a certain religious group, uh, a university, a student of a university, a employee of a certain factory, whatever. Any of those are non-arbitrary identities or groups, right? An arbitrary group would be if I told you right now, or someone in chat could say anything random, and I could say, okay, that's a group label. That would be an arbitrary name. So even arbitrary names are able to produce things in people like favoring their own group, or like producing behaviors where it costs your own group something to not benefit a different group. I don't know how am I going to explain that. So just to wrap up minimal group paradigm, like you play to test a lot of in-group favoritism, you use money games, and you use do you want to donate to group A or group B? Do you want to give to both or to yourself or to your group, and that type of stuff. So in a situation where their group could earn money, but group B, let's just say group A is like, oh, if you choose this option, group A is going to get $5, but group B will get 10, versus if you choose option 2, group A is going to lose $5, but group B will lose 10. People prefer to make that second option. I don't remember exactly what the options were identical, but people prefer to have the difference be greater between the groups than to just benefit everybody like that. And these are for arbitrary groups, again. And for that certain painting, the thing that I was mentioning, like, oh, this has a little story, that's talking about two paintings. I think it's pronounced Klee and Kandinsky, where they just said, like, oh, people of this group tend to be this way. So let's talk a little bit about how you establish an arbitrary group really fast before we move on to belongingness and kind of the core of today's talk. Oh, we're already an hour deep, I guess, kind of the back end of the talk. But, I mean, this can go for as long as we need it to go. So for a minimal group paradigm, for it to kind of, let's just pretend we're a participant, so that way we can understand what a participant goes through to be able to identify with a group they've never even heard about. So you show up, or I'll just put myself in the group so that way I don't put people on the spot or anything like that. So I show up to the lab, I'm a participant, and the scientists tell me, oh, sit down at this computer, you're going to take a quick personality test, that's going to gauge kind of who you are. Or it might be a completely different cover story. It could be a lot of cover stories, it doesn't really matter. And I sit at the computer and I might start filling in some questions. A lot of those questions are bogus to give the impression that it's actually a survey, and that there's like a really weight to it, but there isn't. We're not really interested in that. And then you come across kind of this task where it might ask you, there's different ways of doing this, but one of the common tasks is called like a dot estimation task. So you get a screen on the monitor, you get the screen full of all these dots, and your task is to count how many dots there are on the screen. And you have a timer, you have to do it really fast, and we don't give you enough time on purpose, so no one has enough time to count all the dots. It's impossible. So you will have to estimate. So you're asked to estimate the number of dots and you put it in. Now what number you actually estimate doesn't matter to us. What the computer ends up doing is it randomizes the participants into one of two groups, overestimator or underestimator. Regardless of what they actually estimated, doesn't matter, but they get sorted that way. And then once you're sorted that way, so let's just say I'm the participant, I guessed and it said you're an overestimator. I'm like, okay, I'm an overestimator, and I can start to form my own lay theories of what that means. Like, and I might even be given a description by the scientists, like overestimators tend to be confident, they tend to be assertive, they tend to be leaders and go where no one's gone before, that type of things. Versus the underestimators might get a positive, not necessarily the opposite of that, but positive. Like underestimators tend to be restrained, calm, calculating, better safe than sorry type people. So you start to develop a personality behind something that beforehand didn't constitute a group. An overestimator didn't really constitute a group at all. And I could have chosen to not even call it overestimator or underestimator. I could have called it bloops versus Shagans. I don't know, whatever I want. I call it whatever I want. Say you got sorted into this, and people like this tend to be this way, and then people can begin to attach themselves onto those labels. All right, Vanessa. Well, I hope you can rest. I'm very sorry you're going through what you're going. Hopefully it can improve. Hopefully this helped get your mind off things for a little bit. But thank you so much. Have a good night. Take care. So back to minimal group paradigm. Where was I? Sorry. Shoot. Oh right, you can choose any label you want really with that dot estimation task, and say you people like this tend to be this way. You can start to attach yourself to the identity a little bit. And so just doing that way, you can start to see the other group as outgroup members. That's what you can call them, and people that also overestimated because you're sorting all these people. And again, remember, this is at random. You didn't actually overestimate or underestimate. This is completely random. So this is why it's arbitrary. If it was based on your actual estimation, then you could argue that there's something about overestimators versus underestimators that cause them to be in those blah, 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 blah. But here it's randomized. And there's different tasks. It's not always dot estimation. I don't remember the other tasks off the top of my head. But basically, yeah, I think some of the tasks like the clean Kandinsky was which one do you like more of these two paintings. It was kind of arbitrary, but like you have two paintings. Let me see if they even have the pictures. No, they don't. Klee and Kandinsky. So I believe these. No, those weren't the exact paintings used. But basically, it's just two painters that have these paintings, and basically they just had them up, and they said, which one do you prefer? Other times it could have just been based on the color of the shirt that they came in walking, like they walked in with. That was how they were sorted. So it was kind of random, if you will. So there's multiple ways, and a lot of these studies were done before computers were implemented to the degree that they're implemented today. So obviously this is where dot paradigm, the dot estimation task is. So here it says certain paintings, Klee and Kandinsky. The personal story there is that we have the two paintings in my lab hanging there. It's kind of like, because we use social identity theory in my lab and we use minimal group paradigm in my lab, so we kind of have that as like a haha, like one of the original studies of minimal group paradigm. There you go. So yeah, so that is a little bit about minimal group paradigm and how social identity theory predicts a little bit about that. So putting these little pieces together, a little bit of social psychology theory there, and I talked a little bit about biology at the beginning. I can rehash on it really quick, but I want to start heading towards belongingness. So what makes us feel like we belong? So in today's talk, one of the things that was mentioned was some of the feedback, or how like the positivity or the negativity of your interactions with in-group members. So one of the examples that was given is kind of being a grad student and the experience of being a grad student, having a mentor, and whether or not you feel like you're part of that program or that department or part of the scientists and stuff like that. And one of the things that was a predictor of whether or not someone felt like they belonged or not was the mentorship style, whether they were a positive mentor that, like, let's just say I submitted a paper and it got accepted. The positive mentor would be like, wow, congratulations, you put so much effort into it, I'm so happy for you, blah, 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 like all positive types of stuff. Versus a negative mentorship style might be like, finally, you got it in, like you can finally put something on your CV. Like, geez, took you long enough, that type of stuff. So that type of feedback is that can influence whether you feel like you belong or not. So to the viewer, I ask you, like, what makes you feel like you belong? Think about your social situations, your social groups. What constitutes your social groups? Think about the dynamics between your social groups. Maybe you're in your workplace. Think about any social groups that are formed, right? Maybe you've always thought about groups and labels as very static, but maybe you should start thinking about it more dynamic. And what I mean by that is static, like fixed labels, when in reality some of them can kind of flow and change, and maybe people can get through some of these labels and terms and stuff like that. Maybe others can't. Maybe you should ask yourself, why can some people seem to go through identities and others cannot? What prevents them? There's so many questions in social psychology that we're trying to answer regarding this. It's a very, very complicated but intriguing puzzle to solve for social psychology. And the biological component that I just want to mention here, because we're at an hour and 12 minutes, so if no one's here with comments, questions, I'm going to start to end it soon. We've gone really heavy, or not really heavy, but we did go into a lot of the science, so I'm happy with that. It was indeed a Science Friday. But yeah, I'm going to edit that for the YouTube, of course, and that way it's not super, super long. But yeah, I just wanted to mention these theories, put that out there, social identity and belongingness, like think about belongingness. I'm happy, I might have later streams that dives more into that complex notion of belongingness. It's very tough to get into the nitty gritty on a stream where viewers can have very broad backgrounds and very broad knowledges on these things. And so to tackle something as complex as what exactly predicts your feeling of belongingness, I would have to go over a lot of different things. So hopefully this superficial type of really broad theories can help you start to think about the social world. Think about, like right now, Coca-Cola's under fire. At least I'm seeing a lot of memes for Coca-Cola. Think about those social groups. Like, those are social groups. There's friction between social groups there. You don't have to think about that context specifically, but I'm just saying in the news, for example, think about how social identity plays into the news you're listening, especially regarding groups. Think about how people can behave in groups and how irrational sometimes we can get, like the minimal group paradigm can show. And when I say irrational, it's not necessarily completely irrational. And this is where you can kind of bring in biology, so to speak. And that's where I might start capping this little science, today's Science Friday. So from the biological standpoint, you can kind of also think about, I'm not going to dive super deep in biology either, but you can kind of think about groups as promoters of genetic fitness. So what I mean by genetic fitness is, so your genes is your DNA, what you pass on to your children, what your parents gave to you. And fitness is your ability to pass on those genes. It's not your actual physical fitness, is just your ability to do it. It constitutes your fitness. So maybe back in caveman times, your physical fitness directly related to your genetic fitness, your ability to pass on. Nowadays, your physical fitness isn't the most important. Of course, you need to be alive to procreate and produce your genes and make them go forth. You need to be alive for that, of course. But you don't have to be the most fit person. You don't have to be the strongest, nothing like that. There are different constraints on today's environment for humans, different values and different ways of passing on your genetics, different strategies, and different species use different strategies. So I mentioned we are, as a species, a social species, and I was based on biological studies. A lot of animals are social species. We function better in groups, we survive better in groups, and we get more things done in groups. Things like being able to fly as humans would probably not be able to be done if we all behaved as individuals. A lot of the times biology likes to give the example of, think about a pizza and what it takes to make a pizza. It takes a whole village really to make a pizza in 30 minutes, versus if you tried to make it yourself, it would take you years. Right? And when I say that, really making a pizza would take you forever, it means you have to build the stove. You have to get the fire. Everything that you have in your kitchen right now was produced by someone else. It wasn't made by you. So you have to do it all completely by yourself. You have to go find the wheat, grind it, make the dough for the pizza dough. You have to grow the tomatoes. So that's why I'm saying it would take years, because you need the knowledge, you need the know-how, you need the tools, you need the right place, the right atmosphere. Some of your ingredients might grow better in different places in the world. This is where communities, as coexisting communities, benefit, because we can all just specialize in tasks and then share. Hint, hint, one of the reasons of the channel is I'm specializing in social psychology and trying to share it. Sorry, I just wanted to drop that little parallel there. But biology, so the way you can kind of see groups then is impacting towards your personal genetic fitness. If you are in a group, you're more likely to survive because you're probably hunting together, killing bigger things, more food for you. And again, when I'm talking biology, I'm talking a lot of evolutionary psychology and back in caveman times, things that produced us today, because a lot of these challenges that were essential back then aren't challenges for us today, like getting food for a lot of people. For a lot of people, it still is quite a challenge, and that is, very sad. And there's a lot being done. And there's a lot more we can do, of course. But for a lot of societies, getting food is no longer an issue, just like getting water is no longer an issue. And slowly, hopefully, surely, I can't really attest to that, but slowly we're getting the whole world on board with everyone just having food and water and the basic necessities taken care of. So we're doing this through communities. So your group is kind of that ability. So one of the notions behind like racism, intergroup conflict, and stuff like that, a biological notion, is that when you see someone approaching your group, and this is back in tribes, they're probably holding spears, weapons, and stuff. You don't know if they're about to kill you or not. They're probably not even speaking your language. You don't know how to interact with them. So you have a fear of foreigners. This is what you might know as xenophobia. You might have heard this a lot in political news. Xenophobia, xenophobia, xenophobia. So there's some biological logic to it, but it's not entirely clear and it's not entirely the best explanation. There's a lot of alternate explanations, and there's a lot more to that. But I'm just saying, what I'm trying to say here is groups can kind of form this realistic and symbolic shell or fortress or solitude or safety place for your genetic fitness. So it's very important. It becomes very important for you to be in a group. Also, a group allows you access to mates, right? If you take biology, if you take one of the goals of biology is to mate, to pass on your genes, if that is the goal, then you need access to mates. So that's another way. You're going to have to socialize with people. So you might as well get along with those people. So there's a lot of benefit for yourself in being parts of a group. So being kicked out of a group can mean essentially death, even back in those days, because now you're losing warmth of multiple bodies. Maybe you're huddled in a cave, you get kicked out of the cave, now you're out to fend for yourself. There's saber-toothed tigers preying on individuals. Yikes. So groups are a safety place. So think about that. Now put it back into the minimal group context where you're forming groups, and why would you want your group to get money? Why would you favor your group? Because you're like, hey, because these people might help me. And there can be. I'm not saying there is. I think there are actually papers that have some biological evidence for this. But that's kind of the other side of this story. If you want to think about the story that I'm giving you from social identity, groups, and belongingness, from the biological side, think about that. About how groups used to be. Where are groups originally formed? Why are we in groups? What benefit do groups give us? Right? Groups give us the benefit of creating airplanes, of creating science, of creating vaccines, of creating so much. So think about groups in that sense. Right? I want to have another Science Friday on the benefits of groups and community, but I fear that some people are going to take it in a very political sense, like communists and stuff like that, when I don't mean it that way. I mean in a biological sense. If you look at ants, how they work together to produce colonies that are huge. They can carry things way bigger than them because they work together. So humans aren't that different from that. Biology, a lot of biology things function that way. Your cells, who you are as an individual, is a composition of cells working together, which is a composition of chemicals and the molecules working together. There's a pattern there in biology. There's a pattern of community and working together and leading to better things and positive outcomes for everybody. So I just wanted to put it into context using biology and some social psychology of things going on around you. Maybe this can help shape how you perceive your groups, your own groups and the groups around you. Your membership to groups, what constitutes your membership to those groups, what benefit your groups are giving you. Do you have self-esteem rooted in some of those groups? Maybe that's why you really wanted to buy that car or that brand. You told yourself one thing, but maybe inside you're pulling some self-esteem from there, so it's important to you. I'm not judging you at all, but we can put things into perspective sometimes if we use some social psychology and biology. Cool. Well, I've had a lot of fun talking about social identity. There's so much more to talk about, so I'm just going to continue to talk about it, including during gaming streams and future Science Fridays. Thanks to everyone who stopped by and talked with me today. I always appreciate the company. And thanks to all listeners. You guys are amazing, all of you. And thanks to anyone listening to recorded versions of this. You are a champion. You are all the best. Everybody involved in this, thank you so much for the support. I appreciate it. It just continues to motivate me to continue doing this and spreading as much information and knowledge as I can, as much education as I can. And I just want to help people also get in touch with science and education as much as I can. So again, feel free to reach out during any stream to me, but it's been fun. I hope everyone has a great weekend. It's been great, guys. I'm Shark Party, the gaming grad. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye. Nice ending with the song.